Sometimes, the smallest act of compassion can change two lives forever. This is the story of a nurse who delivered hope where it was needed most. In a place built for punishment, hope was not supposed to survive. But sometimes, it did. Rebecca Martinez never believed a prison could teach her about forgiveness. Until she met him. She had been the nurse here for 5 years, patching wounds that came from violence, not accidents. Marcus Thompson, inmate 4032, once a musician, now a man waiting for a sentence he already accepted. The first time their eyes met, it wasn't pity she felt. It was recognition. Two souls quietly carrying the weight of something they could never undo. Before the walls and the orange jumpsuit, he was a man of music. The kind who made people believe the world still had beauty. She wasn't supposed to feel anything. Nurses were taught to stay neutral. But compassion doesn't follow rules. She told herself it was empathy, not connection. But his quiet dignity haunted her more than his crime ever could. Even locked away, he found freedom in art. And without realizing it, she became his muse. His humming filled the corridor like sunlight slipping through cracks. It reminded her of mornings she'd long stopped believing in. Rules, boundaries, protocols. She knew them all. But the heart never signs paperwork before breaking them. He never complained when hurt. Pain, for him, was just another visitor. One he'd learned to greet in silence. Her heart skipped. No one had ever said it like that before. Not as an insult, but as a truth he wished wasn't true. In that brief exchange, two worlds, one bound by law, the other by guilt, found the smallest bridge. He had made one mistake, one terrible night that cost him everything. But he never defended himself. He believed redemption had to be earned, not begged for. She realized he'd been teaching other inmates to read, quietly, without recognition. A man rebuilding others, even while broken himself. In that moment, she saw him, not as a number, not as a criminal, but as the man he still was under all the labels. She didn't know why she did it. Maybe because kindness was the only rebellion left in a place built on cruelty. He smiled for the first time in months. A small, quiet smile that felt like sunrise. Rumors had started. A nurse too soft on an inmate. Too many visits. Too much time spent where compassion was considered weakness. In that instant, she realized, maybe healing wasn't just about wounds. Maybe it was about daring to see the human underneath the crime. She thought he'd look angry after being questioned by the guards. But instead, he looked peaceful. Like a man who had already forgiven the world. It was nothing. And yet, it was everything. The touch of two people who weren't supposed to feel. She'd treated hundreds of inmates before. None had ever made her heart race like this. None had ever looked at her as if she mattered. In the dark, he wrote words he'd never say aloud. Words for her. Words that made him remember who he used to be before steel and silence became his world. Sometimes love doesn't begin with a kiss. It begins with courage and paper. She pressed the note to her chest, feeling something she hadn't in years. The dangerous warmth of being seen. In a place built for punishment, they found pieces of peace. In stolen minutes and unspoken words. Thunder roared, but for once, the danger was outside the walls. Not between them. She should have walked away. He should have stayed silent. But sometimes, hearts speak louder than rules. In that fragile silence, something sacred bloomed. Hope, in the most hopeless of places. She told herself it was just duty. But her heart arrived an hour before her shift did. She watched him work. The strength, the control. It wasn't attraction. It was admiration? Or at least, that's what she kept telling herself. Some silences don't need to be broken. They just need to be felt. In an instant, the spell shattered. Reality rushed back. Uniform, rules, danger. She had sworn to remain professional. But watching him walk into darkness felt like losing light itself. His words echoed louder in his absence. "Thank you for seeing me." She realized. She didn't just see him. She cared. She wanted to ask if he was okay. if they'd hurt him. But all she managed was a quiet, trembling smile. He joked like a man who had nothing to lose. But for her, every word risked everything. Sometimes love isn't loud. It's a heartbeat, a breath, a glance, enough to make the world pause. And in that moment, caring became rebellion, and rebellion became love. He drew quietly, not escape routes, not weapons, but faces. Her face. The only freedom he had left was made of lines and shadows. She saw it, the curve of her smile, his rough pencil strokes. She said nothing, but her heart stumbled. Violence was routine here, but that scream still tore through her chest like thunder. For a man branded as dangerous, he carried a healer's gentleness. And she saw it, the truth behind the record. For the first time, she believed him. Not because of his words, but his actions. She had seen injustice before, but not like this. His crime didn't add up. Someone wanted him forgotten. She whispered, "You didn't do it, did you?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. In a world built on walls, that tiny piece of paper was rebellion and trust. She had given him something no lawyer, no guard, no system ever could believe. She didn't plan for this. No one ever plans for love, especially not behind bars. She had spent the whole night awake, replaying his words, his eyes, the truth she wasn't supposed to see. It wasn't a look of longing. It was recognition. Two souls, chained by the same lie, pretending not to notice. The words burned, too soft, as if compassion were a crime, as if feeling made her weak. Even silence was evidence here, and the walls, they remembered everything. Every word he wrote was a whisper to her, unsent, unseen, but real. She froze, just one line, but it said everything her heart had been screaming. She didn't understand how care could grow in a place built for punishment, but it did, quietly, dangerously. He had been condemned by money, not truth, and now, she was the only one who could rewrite his ending. She shouldn't have been there. Every click of the cabinet felt like betrayal, but her conscience had already chosen a side. In that single moment, she realized, saving him might cost her everything. Her job, her name, her freedom. She had found it, the piece of truth buried under years of silence. But in this place, truth was more dangerous than lies. Her pulse raced with guilt and purpose, two enemies trapped inside the same heart. She could walk away, pretend she never saw it, pretend justice wasn't choking behind bars. But pretending had already cost too much. She could see it in his eyes, the spark of hope she had prayed to see. In a place where hope was forbidden, she had just given him a reason to breathe. She learned something new that day, the sound of fear, when it wears the mask of authority. The system didn't like people who asked questions, especially not people who found answers. She wasn't afraid for herself anymore, only that she might be too late. He didn't know if freedom would ever come, but he wanted her to know. She had already set him free inside. She dropped the folder. Time, the one thing she didn't have, was now her greatest enemy. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It chains you to a choice that can break everything you are. The real killer was one of their own, and they buried it, like they buried every mistake. She'd spent her life upholding rules, until she realized the rules were built to protect the wrong people. Sometimes, believing someone costs more than evidence. It costs your peace, your loyalty, your soul. Love doesn't always come from soft places. Sometimes it's born in the middle of a war for truth. In that moment, she wasn't just an officer. She was a storm, one woman against an entire system. And for the first time, she wasn't speaking as a cop. She was speaking as a woman who finally saw the man behind the crime. Freedom doesn't always look like celebration. Sometimes, it looks like two people standing in silence, finally breathing again. And just like that, the walls between them, iron, fear, guilt, began to fall. He found redemption. She found purpose. And together, They proved that love doesn't need perfection, only courage. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is believe in someone no one else would.